Well, welcome to another in our series of meeting people in and around Truro and Cornwall, some of whom have a connection with the cathedral, some don't. Life, the cathedral and everything. 20 minutes spent in conversation with someone who's had a part to play in our lives, whether by direct association or within the wider community as a whole. We will talk to them about their life, what their thinking is, their beliefs, in short, what makes them tick. And today I'm very pleased to be able to speak to Bob Smith, who has been a councillor in Truro since the mid-teens. Robert has been the Mayor of Truro for the last year and has come from a background of teaching. He was assistant principal of a Manchester academy, retiring from that in 2010, having served for 35 years in Manchester secondary schools. He says he was drafted into Moss Side after the riots of 1981 as part of an initiative to regenerate the area. He's born in Sheffield but spent his formative years in Plymouth, and because of being in Plymouth, the natural thing to do, of course, is to cross the Tamar and spend lots of time in Cornwall. Bob trained as a sculptor at Plymouth College and Manchester Sculpture School and moved back to Cornwall in 2015, where he and his wife got involved in an action to prevent development of green space in Truro. And I suspect, Bob, that's what kindled your interest in local politics and to get involved in that part of life.
I had absolutely no intention of getting involved in politics when I came to Truro. It was purely by accident, but I'd spent most of my professional career in Moss Side, and just it evolved over the years, of course, that what I was actually doing, besides teaching, is building communities. And a lot of my work as a senior member of staff involved liaison with the local community. And what I found when I moved down here, of course, was that I started doing the same thing, almost by natural process. So when a developer decided that they were going to squeeze as many houses as they possibly can into a tiny space that was considered green amenity space, I immediately garnered the residents and organised a community action group, which became a residents association, and it was they who elected me to the city council. And the rest is history.
Yes.
But I had absolutely no intention of getting involved in local politics.
No, but you can't stop yourself, can you, Bob? You can't stop yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's but what brought me down to Cornwall in the first place was the fact that I'd been ricocheting between Manchester and Plymouth for best part of 40 years. While I was a student, my family continued living in Plymouth. My sister married a Cornishman and lived in St Austell. So over that 40-year period, I was up and down continuously. And so I got to know this side of the Tamar quite well throughout my life. And I always had it in the back of my mind that I would retire down here. They were, after all, my teenage formative years in Cornwall were very, very memorable. Learning to drive, having mates with cars and zooming across to Newquay, beach parties and all that kind of thing in the late 60s. You can't beat it.
I'm sure.
So I suppose what brought me down here was looking for my lost youth.
I'm sure you've recovered that, Bob. I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure.
It sounds an obvious question, but have you enjoyed being the Mayor of Truro?
It's been a most amazing experience. I never imagined that I would meet so many interesting people and visit so many interesting places. I've got more friends and acquaintances in the 5 years that I've lived in Truro than I had for 40 years living in Greater Manchester. So people are so welcoming and so they're so forgiving of the fact that I come from the other side of the Tamar anyway. So, I've enjoyed it immensely. I don't think I could maintain the pace for very long, though, because it is an extremely demanding role. It never occurred to me that that it could be quite so exhausting as it has been.
Yeah. Well, what does the mayor bring to the party then, Bob? What actually,
Well,
role does that mean? Does that
yes,
mean in everyday life? What you brought to it?
strictly speaking, my official job is to chair council meetings. That we are, the Truro City Council is meant to be the voice of the immediate neighbourhood that is fed back to the powers that be. We do have a reasonable sized budget to cover the servicing of various things like the parks and the public loos and all the rest of it. But essentially, the local authority or the local council is about sustaining communities, and I can see a really strong parallel between what I was doing in Manchester and what I'm doing now as mayor. That I am making sure that in my mayoral role that we play an active part in creating the identity of Truro and ensuring the people of Truro get a fair slice of the cake. But that's a whole other story. I won't go into that now.
I don't think you're going to stop when your mayoralty is over. I'm sure not. You've still got that.
I'm pretty sure I've got my finger in so many pies. It'd be very difficult to stop.
That's good to hear. And because we had that wonderful, seems a long time ago now because of the lockdown, that commemorative service in the Cathedral, the Community Awards. You want to tell us a little bit about that and the significance of that from your point of view?
Well, I have to say, I've had that idea in the back of my head quite a long time ago when I first got elected to the council. But what spurred me on was going to a similar kind of event in Bodmin, but it wasn't. It was part of a service where 2 or 3 people in the local community who'd been serving as volunteers for many years, and they were presented with a certificate during service. And I thought, well, it seems so unfair in many ways because there's so many volunteers. That's what struck me when I first came to Truro, is that a number of volunteers involved in keeping the systems going. And that's what creates neighbourhoods, people who are willing to give their time. And there's an awful lot of them in Truro that are working away behind the scenes, very rarely get any recognition. And I thought, we need to make a point of this and raise awareness of the fact that so many people are doing so much to make their community work. And of course, during this coronavirus episode, people have risen to the challenge. There's lots of people been helping one another and drawn in a lot of new people to the voluntary sector to help us get through this difficult time. But in terms of what the council, the involvement of the council, the other thing that I noticed that people are totally unaware of, the first question people ask me when they discover that you're mayor is, do you get a limo with the job? and I said, there's no limo. It's purely voluntary. And they squint at me and say, you mean you do it for nothing? And I say, yes, as all the other councillors do. Well, I thought it was a bit of a gravy train being a councillor. I have to explain, no, they're all volunteers. That if you work for Cornwall Council and then you might get a very small remuneration. You certainly couldn't live on it. But in terms of local council and town councillors, they get nothing. They do it because they've got a sense of commitment to the community. And I think people of, dare I say, our generation, Roger, had it all as young people. We had free education, we had free transport, we got grants to study, so we had free education and free medical care. We had it laid on a plate for our generation, and when I retired, I thought, I really do need to pay something back somehow, somewhere. So this is what I've ended up doing. But I think there's an awful lot of people who could do more, but either they've become soft over the years and don't want to face the challenge, or they've had such a hard time they can't take on another challenge. But I think there's an awful lot of people, retirees like myself, who've still got a lot of energy and a lot to give, and I'd like to see them step up to the mark, especially at this time. So yes, it's great. It's a great thing being part of the community.
Absolutely, Bob. And I think you're right. I think the word retired does have this rather pejorative association, doesn't it?
Yes.
Really? It can be a liberating time, that when you're free to really get involved in what you'd like to do. And these unheralded acts of voluntary service, it was really wonderful to be part of that event in the cathedral. And I thank you very much for inspiring us with that and bringing that to the table. It was a really wonderful thing to do. Can you tell us a little bit about your time in Moss Side, 40 odd years ago now? Social conditions really different then. And how have things improved or not in these past 40 odd years?
I think they've improved immensely over that period of time. People have become more aware and more sensitive to differences in community, and are learning how to celebrate them rather than to fight over them. When the situation arose in Moss Side, I was teaching in a most remarkable school, actually. It was called the Manchester School of Art, and on the northern side, Cheetham Hill side of Manchester, and it was run by Ernest Goodman, who was a visionary in terms of education and educational provision. And he ran the school with the ethos that every single individual has something to say. You just need to find the language that they need in order to express it. And that was at the core of the curriculum. And we had an arts team there that used music, dance, drama, the visual arts to make it happen. Unfortunately, in their narrow-mindedness, they closed that school, and I ended up going to a different school as a head of art department. And then the Moss Side riots occurred, and they looked for ways of regenerating the area and asked me to go along there and work in the art department. And we built up a team there of, I think all together at its height, there was about 18 of us doing dance, drama, music, all kinds of things, and taking it out into the community and bringing the community into the school. That's where this idea of public services they actually belong to people, and they need to be shown the fact that they do have access and they do have the power to express themselves. And many of my pupils from that period, it was a very different time in the early 80s. There was a lot of drugs, a lot of violence. I'd had my own life threatened 2 or 3 times in the process. Guns, knives, drugs were daily occurrences. But over a period of about 4 or 5 years, using creativity, I had a good friend working in the school there who was absolutely marvellous poet, and he in a way started the rap scene in Manchester during the early 80s, and he got all these teenagers doing poetry. It was absolutely amazing. Yeah. So it was a very different place then. If you go to Moss Side today, it's an up and coming place now. It's getting wealthier, and it's got the most marvellous gallery in the Whitworth Art Gallery on Oxford Road there, and it was right next to the school, and it's the most marvellous place to live and work now. But it wasn't in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, how many people have we come across who say they owe their livelihoods and the change of direction to an inspirational teacher? And I'm sure you must have inspired so many different people.
I'd like to think so.
I'm sure you did. Are you optimistic about the future of local government?
I am. in terms of developing communities and encouraging people to participate, I think certainly following this pandemic that we're going through, people will start to think about what is really valuable to them. Is it the pursuit of money and possessions, or is it are they more concerned about the people around them and the circumstances that people find themselves in? And I'm hoping that that people become more aware of the impact that what they say and what they do and how they conduct themselves, how that impacts on the community around them. One of the main things that, in terms of being optimistic, I would like to think that now we've got here in Cornwall and in Truro a sort of target for reducing CO2 emissions, that people will be more aware of the environment and start thinking about what it is that we're doing to pollute the place where we live. So yes, I'm fairly optimistic. Greta Thunberg's done a marvellous job of raising people's awareness, and so if young people can think like that and she can take an awful lot of them with her, then yes, I am optimistic for the future. I hope it is the case. I'm married to a vegan. My wife's a vegan, and she belongs to an organisation called Compassion in World Farming, and she is hopeful that people become aware of the impact that their day-to-day lives have on the environment. And if we're going to improve things, we need to look at every little thing about our day-to-day lives. I'm a meat eater, so you can imagine we have some very interesting conversations about nutrition and the impact that farming and agriculture has on the environment. So, but I think that the world will gradually, I hope, gradually become more aware of the damage it's doing to the planet in lots of different ways. And I do sincerely hope that that things improve in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and the Church of England's part of that discussion. The General Synod, we have accepted a motion to do everything we can to become carbon neutral by 2030, which is a heck of a challenge, but it only highlights the urgency of addressing our way of life, and perhaps the current pandemic is a way of showing us that, really, these that other things haven't done so far.
I think it will bring about a lot of positive changes. I sincerely hope so. But politicians are notoriously short-sighted and short-term activists. One of your questions you put to me is what frustrates you? Well, that exactly, short-term vision, that people don't do joined-up politics globally, nationally, or locally a lot of the time, and that if I wanted to change anything, I'd try and find a way of making politicians sit down and have a long-term plan that they all stick to. That would be marvellous.
Well, you never know, Bob. You never know. How are you personally coping with the lockdown and all this? Are you personally coping with it?
Yes, yeah, I'm okay. I'm one of these vulnerable people that has to stay indoors. So I get to walk around the garden a lot. My wife's taken on all the chores of shopping and all the rest of it. But it's actually quite refreshing. You get time to sit and do the things that you don't normally have time to do. So I don't get a lot of time to catch up on reading, because the amount of paperwork that comes with being a counsellor, that hasn't eased up, and we have been having meetings through Zoom and Skype and all the rest of it. So we are continuing the work of the council in the background, but I spend a lot of time. I like history. I like history. I like science, and and I've discovered a wonderful TV channel called Smithsonian Channel. The Smithsonian Channel is marvellous in terms of history and science. It's great. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. But I'm an amateur musician as well. I play my guitar and sing, and so every Thursday night when we go out to applaud the key workers, I take my guitar out there and do a couple of songs for the neighbours.
That's
So yes, it's got its perks. Certainly, my garden's never looked as tidy as it does at the moment.
well, it's wonderful. Sadly, our time is coming towards a close. We've had 20 minutes, and
That went very quickly.
you're a very interesting guy. And I just wanted to, on behalf of everybody, to thank you for all that you have done during your time of mayor. I think you've raised the profile in a great way. You've really brought home the notion of what it is to be part of a community. I'm an incomer as well to Cornwall, and I think if I have to make, hesitantly I say this, a comment about the Cornish and being in Cornwall, ever so slightly wary of national institutions coming in and sort of thinking they've got all the answers, and community is locally generated, and that's when it's its strongest, and you've represented and served that in your...
Very, very nice of you to invite me to take part.
Well, it's great, and thank you for all that you're doing to enhance our community life. Now, we don't let you go without, we like to offer either a little poem or a little extract from literature, or a quote or something. And have you got something for us, Bob, to round off our...
I have, actually. One of the defining moments in my life was watching Carl Sagan in the 70s, and you may remember a series called Cosmos. And I saw that on TV as I think it was late 70s or something. I can't remember exactly. But he made a speech in the film, and it was a sequel book that he had published afterwards. It was called The Pale Blue Dot, and that image of it was a photograph taken by Voyager as it was leaving our solar system, and it looked back on the planet Earth, which was just a tiny, tiny speck floating in a little, a beam of sunshine in this vast empty space. And I'm a bit of a science buff as well. So one of my favourite quotes is Carl Sagan's quote. So I'm going to have to read it because it's quite long, but I'll do it. I can't do his accent, unfortunately. I think he's got the most marvellous accent. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being, whoever it was, lived out their entire lives on that dot. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilizations, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar or supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants at some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Think of the rivers of blood that spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. I think that was one of the most profound things I ever heard.
That is riveting, Bob, and terribly moving and terribly truthful, and just as relevant today as it was when it was first uttered 50 odd years ago. Well, thank you for sharing that, and God go with you, and we pray for many more years of service from you yet to come, Bob. You're a true dedicated...
I sincerely hope so.
Yes. Thank you for your
Many thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.